Welcome to the Mindful Nomad podcast. I'm your host, Miguel Gutierrez. This podcast is an exploration into the world of creatives, community leaders, and entrepreneurs, taking a deep dive into their lives, focusing strongly on lifestyle, spirituality, mental health, and education. So grab a seat, relax, and join me for this exciting journey through conversations with other mindful nomads. This was previously recorded for the podcast Travel Cuts and Consciousness, but I've decided to keep it on a playlist as it still aligns well with the Mindful Nomads podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to a brand new episode of Travel Cuts and Consciousness. I'd like to introduce you all to our guest today, Andrew, founder of Andrew Does Hair, an ADH brand. Andrew started his hair journey in 2003, originally trying to become a barber, but moving into cosmetology due to the lack of schools in his area. Andrew's emphasis with his haircuts tend to focus more on the styling, and this helped him grow his Instagram and brand into a household name within the barbering and hairdressing community around the world. I've followed Andrew for many years now, and we've never actually spoke face to face, so it's great to finally have the opportunity to. So, Andrew, how are you doing?
I'm doing very good. Thank you so much for having me. It's about time we get to speak face to face, right? I've been meaning to do this for years.
Yeah, and what better time than actually just to record it all? Our first actual interaction. How's everything going with the lockdown for you?
Oh, it's been weird. I mean, like everybody else, I can't cut hair right now. And, while I do have the product line, sales have basically completely stopped. And so, my life is frozen just like anybody else's. Thankfully, though, I've been wise with my finances for the last decade, and I'm not going to go under or lose my house or anything through this. So I'm just waiting, just patiently. I'm trying not to get upset about it. I see a lot of barbers and hairstylists who are just angry about the situation. And I understand, if you're losing your livelihood, you could become angry. And thankfully, I haven't gotten angry about it yet. A lot of denial, though, a lot of bargaining, but just waiting. How about you? How are things on your end?
Yeah, everything's good. It got to the point where maybe through February, I was saying, I need a holiday, I need to just stop for a little bit. So it kind of is a blessing. I'm a bit of a hermit and an introvert anyway, so I will just lock myself up in my house, and to be able to have the chance to do that for weeks on end and get some housework done, it's great for me. It's nice not to be waking up to countless texts every day, messages and emails about certain things, and just to have if I am getting them emails, I'm gonna have the leisure to be able to reply in my own time, and there's no stress about it. So yeah, it's going good for me. It's just a bizarre time for everyone, I think. Like you were saying, it's a tough time for hairdressers and barbers around the world because everyone's in such different situations. There's so many self-employed barbers and hairdressers, especially in the States. So if you haven't been wise with your finances, it's not easy. And if you're a business owner, definitely even more pressure on you because, if you're a self-employed hairstylist, at least you can just pay rent. But if you've got a business, you've got to pay rent for the shop as well as the stress of having to pay your mortgage or rent. Yeah,
the more that I've talked to people throughout this, there's a sense of it sucks for the individual stylist or barber. And then because it sucks for him and his 8 other coworkers, it sucks even more for the owner because they're on the hook for more money, as you just said. But then some of these owners have, the landlord that would own the building they're in, they got to pay a mortgage on the building. And so if they're not getting rent and so it trickles up and everybody gets a little bit more screwed. I think in our industry, it's very easy to look at the shop owner and think oh, well, they're set, they own a shop. But you don't realize that just because you own a shop doesn't mean you have huge margins. You could be taking everybody's rent and just making the shop's rent on that. I've actually known hairstylists who own salons and don't make any more money than the average hairstylist, even though they have 13 chairs, but the expenses of running the salon, basically they break even after having all their employees, and then they just make what they make cutting hair. And so I think this whole thing has I think it's kind of shown that people that we think are just so set really aren't. And then on the flip side, I've talked to some barbers that are very low key. They don't have big Instagram numbers. They're not flashy in their lifestyle or anything. And they're just yeah, it's been a nice vacation. I needed a vacation. And they're not worried about it. And so I don't know. It's definitely interesting. Some of the people that typically tried to appear that they had so much money and success with their Yeezys and everything are like start setting up GoFundMes asking for money. And I don't judge anybody who's been forced to do that, but I just think it's kind of interesting. And I hope when we come back, we can all have a little bit straighter priorities. Hopefully that'll be like the silver lining of this whole thing is, growing up and learning how to be a responsible adult. You always hear that like, oh, save for emergencies, and you never do, or like you barely do. But now after seeing this thing, it's like, oh my gosh, this stuff really can happen in our lifetime. Like we really can face some, like I would talk to my grandparents and they faced adversity. Like they were in concentration camps in World War II. And I would think like, oh, well, that's all history and that stuff can't happen now. And not that I'm saying this is as bad as the Holocaust, but we're facing some adversity. Like I'm definitely going to save after this.
I think it's something we'd never planned for. Like no one ever thought, oh, a big virus is going to come from China and affect the whole world. I mean, apart from Bill Gates, obviously, but he saw it coming.
Yeah, seriously though. It feels like an episode out of a, what is that, Black Mirror or something. It's like it's just weird. It doesn't, like every other day when I wake up and go out of my house and I see people wearing masks, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. It's not a weird dream. This is happening still.
The weird thing for me that first happened was when I was just going out to walk the dog and people would cross the street to not get close to me. And I was just like, and then I was like, oh, I keep forgetting that there's social distancing.
I actually haven't minded that aspect of it too much. I mean, like typically when this isn't happening, if I'm in the grocery store and somebody just comes too close to me, it just always bothers me. I'm like, ugh, keep your space. And not that I'm a germaphobe or anything, but I don't know. And so lately, like I love that people will go out of their way to walk around me.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. The build up to it was the weirdest thing. I don't know if it's the same as over there as it was here. It kind of happened so fast. It was like 1 week it was like yeah, they could come over and there's potentially going to be some knock-on effects in our country, and then a week later it's like yeah, there's going to be a lockdown, and then a week later it's like there's a lockdown. It went from like I was still planning to book a holiday like for the month later. And then it was like, oh no, Thailand's not letting people into the country, and then they're gonna have 2 weeks quarantine. I was like, well, I'm not gonna go for my holiday and quarantine in Thailand.
Yeah, it was crazy how fast it came on, and how like I had things planned. Actually, this weekend I was supposed to go to Ohio for a big hair event. Hair camp is what it's called. And like, so I had all this stuff on the schedule, and even like the little things, just haircuts that I was taking in my studio. Like, I came in one day to do haircuts, just a couple haircuts for some models, and I didn't know that day that it was going to be my last day cutting hair for a while. And so with my very last model, as I was cutting his hair, we on his phone, we were watching Trump do some address or speech about the virus. And that's when he said, hey, everyone's locking down. And the next day after that, my next models I had lined up were like, I'm not going to come in. I'm scared of the virus. And then that was it. And I didn't see it coming. Like, and I had to cancel a whole bunch of clients and cancel a bunch of models. And even right now, I have clients and people reaching out to me like, when can we book again? When can you get me again? And I don't know. I don't know when I don't know when we're going to open up again. I don't know what it's going to look like when we open up, because now I'm hearing that there's going to be new legislature in place as far as how a salon is supposed to be run. And we're supposed to have new cleanliness rules or something like, before you could use the same cape all day. You just change the neck strip. And I've heard that moving forward, we're going to be required to have a new cape and a new comb for every client. I've even heard rumors that we might have to start using an autoclave, like a sterilizer, like the way that like a dentist would use to sterilize everything. And so when clients are asking me, oh, when can you come back, or when can you cut my hair again? I'm like, I don't freaking know. And so in that way, it's been kind of nice. Like, I absolutely have wiped my slate clean. Like my booking software, I just blocked it all out. And whenever I have a hard date to come back, I'm going to book my priority clients first, the ones that have been with me longest, before I actually open up my books to everybody. But as of right now, like, I don't want to book something for May 10 and find out that, they stretched the lockdown until June, and then have to reschedule people again. So right now it's been kind of an oddly nice forced vacation, as you hinted earlier. I can't book people. Like I even have salons reaching out asking me to do classes, and I'm like, oh, do you have an open date? They're like, no, but we just want to think forward. And I'm like, Well, I don't want to put anything down until I know.
Yeah, there's no point scheduling stuff and then you have to cancel it again.
Exactly, yeah. And although I don't know if that routine and that sort of fear is probably going to just exacerbate the problem, I think maybe if people just like weren't afraid to book things, maybe things would pick up again. Because also, I mean, I keep hearing rumors on one hand that, oh, next week we're open again, like they're gonna lift the ban early. But then I also hear other extremes like, oh, this is gonna go on for 2 years in some way. And so I hear both of these extremes. I don't know what to believe. And as I said earlier, I'm not getting angry about any of it. I'm just like sad.
I think everyone just wants to get back behind the chair or like do stuff, at least even if it's just a little bit. I think we are opening the Berlin store on May 5th, but I don't know if this is the staff have come up with this idea, but they've kind of told me that the government's pushed you got to use disposable capes, clients have to wear masks, there's no drinks allowed. Obviously
people can't come in with their mates, like you got to come alone for a haircut.
Yeah. So all these different things, and obviously we're going to set time aside after every client to fully sanitize and stuff, and we're going to try and get masks to sell, not to make money, but because they're quite expensive now. Because I'd rather people come in and use a fresh mask than come in with one they've reused for a week. That's probably, it might have germs on, or it just makes no sense. So yeah, it's going to be fun. So I was looking at the disposable capes, and they look like the ponchos that you see at people at festivals. It's just bizarre. Anyway, enough about COVID-19. It's already dominating all our lives. I think a lot of people. I mean, this is going to be quite a varied audience on this podcast. There's going to be people on my YouTube and some on Instagram, and some people who just probably come upon it by chance. So not everyone will know your story, and to be honest, I didn't know your story anyway, because it's not always out there, like you say, you haven't written a complete bio. So can you just kind of run through a little bit about you and your upbringing and how you got into hair?
Yeah. So when I was in school growing up, I never was good at school, and I just wanted the path of least resistance, and I actually didn't even finish high school. And then a friend of mine at that time had been going to school to cut hair, and I found out you don't need a high school diploma to cut hair. So I just went to hair school because I thought it would be easy, and I thought it would be flexible. I could dress how I wanted and get tattoos if I want and make my own schedule and that sort of thing. And so I went to school for hair because it was just easy. But I wanted to be a barber. I was 17 at the time, and there was that stigma, like if you're a hairdresser, you're like gay. And I was 17 and insecure, and I was like, oh, I got to be a barber because that's manly. But I couldn't find any barber schools around me, and so I just caved and went to cosmetology school, and was always more focused on short hair. It was more fun for me from the very beginning. And after I got my license and I started cutting hair in a salon, because I was better with short hair, my clientele just developed that way. Like if 5 people with short hair came in, 4 of them would come back and become regulars, to where if 5 people with long hair came in, 1 of them would come back and become a regular. And so after a couple of years, as my clientele built up, I was very, very busy with short hair. And this was before social media. Like we were still using MySpace at this time. And so I was just very busy because looking back at it, I was very focused on styling hair. And at that time, if you were a barber, you didn't style hair like at all. And so I would get clients all the time who were used to going to barbers. And when they came to me, they're like, wow, I have a hairstyle now. And around that time, just men's fashion and culture in general was allowing guys to have cool hair. And to where before that, it was like, if you cared too much about your hair, they make fun of you. Like, what was the word? Metrosexual. I don't know if you guys had that term over there. But that was kind of just becoming the norm. Like men could care about their hair. And so because I was doing I was putting in a lot of effort to actually styling hair and thinking about the trends and the overall aesthetic, the way that a hairdresser is traditionally trained to do, to where barbers were just doing good haircuts, it helped me to stand out. So when I got on Instagram, the only thing I intended to do with it was just post a lookbook for my clients so they could, shuffle through it and say, oh, I like this haircut, give me that one. But in the first couple months I was on there, I just developed a little bit of a following. I think I got 10,000 followers kind of by accident. And I had no idea how it happened. I just was posting my work and that happened. And so I was curious as to why I was getting followers. And so I started reading about marketing books and I started reading marketing books and things and trying to figure out what I was doing that was working so I could do more of it. And as my following grew, opportunities started to come, and I just realized the shape of my business was changing drastically. I had already been a very, very busy hairdresser, charging more than anybody in my town, and that was pre-social media. And because of social media, well, not because of social media, but I happened to make a hair product around the time that my social media was growing. And it wasn't because I have a following, so I'm going to sell a product. There was a product that I liked and used by Redken that they discontinued. And so I wanted to make something similar to it just for my own use. I wasn't planning on selling it anywhere, but because of my social media following, people were like, well, what are you using? And can I buy some? So I started selling product on the side, and I never, ever expected it to become a thing. I never expected it to become a business, but eventually it did. Today we have, including myself, 2.5 employees, and we have an office, and it's my bread and butter. I make more money on the product than I do cutting hair. Not that I make amazing money on product, but I make enough that I don't have to cut hair all the time. And it's freed me up to be able to do more creative work with hair. It's been a passion of mine from the beginning. I don't get thrilled doing a really good haircut on a person who wants a really good haircut. I like doing haircuts that more or less challenge the norm, kind of offend people, if you will. I put out some haircuts that a lot of people will look at and go, oh, this guy must have messed up. But to me, it's just kind of fun to poke at the status quo in that way. And so, ideally, my dream would be to get hired on to a huge company as a creative director and just do creative photo shoot hair all day. I look at Jody Taylor, if you're familiar with him, and I just envy his work. All he does is photo shoots and because of Instagram and the product line and everything, I've been able to build for myself the ability to just do creative work 5 days out of the week. And I still take clients 1 day a week where I'll do normal haircuts for normal people. But yeah, so that's who I am and where I'm at and what I do. I also dabble in education. I've traveled the world doing seminars and things. I do quite a bit of online education, a little bit through YouTube, which I've been doing a lot more lately. And I did a lot of education for thehairjam.com, which is a website that I started with some friends a couple years ago. I want to say I have 10 hours of education there, everything from how to raise your prices and how to do a better haircut, the technical work, obviously, to photography. And this is something I wanted to talk to you about. It's become so apparent to me that in our current culture of hair, the people who really, really get ahead do so with one of these, It's a lot of barbers will kind of hate on the fact I'm not a photographer, I'm a barber. But the barbers and hairstylists who are world famous today, and even in the past, even before social media, were able to do so because of their content. We know Vidal Sassoon was good, not because we saw Vidal's haircuts, but because we saw photos of Vidal's haircuts. And yourself.
The imagery is iconic.
Exactly. And so that's why I these days I put so much emphasis on barbers and stylists getting nice cameras and learning how to use them, because that is how you write your ticket. I mean, not one of the opportunities that I've gotten over the years came to me because somebody walked in my salon and said, hey, you're good. Do you want to come teach a class? They all came to me because somebody saw my Instagram, which was photos of my work. And so when I see these frustrated barbers and stylists who want to grow, and they're really, really good technically, but their photos are crap, it's well, you got to improve there. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there. I hope it's okay.
That's fine. You've only skipped to the end of the interview and questions. No, it's good. It's interesting for me because obviously I've seen your photography evolve over the years and your haircuts as well. But I was saying to Jody this actually a couple of nights ago. He was on the podcast. You and him and some other people as well, you've got the style of images or the style of haircuts that it can pop up on your feed and you'll know it's their photo without looking at the name. You know what I mean? I think that's your USP, is that you have this style of haircutting that does, go against the norm. It's not always perfect.
I take that as a great compliment. Thank you.
Yeah. No, it's something but it's also something that's really hard to do. Make messy hair and not perfect hair look good. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Well, I say all the time, one of the hardest things to do with hair, and it's my favorite thing to aim to do, is to style hair in a way that looks like it wasn't styled. like when you look at iconic hair throughout decades, it's rarely hair that was combed perfectly into place. You know, maybe Elvis at times looked like he was combed perfectly into place, but for the most part, you look at James Dean's hair, he never looked combed. You know what I mean? So
It looked like bedhead.
I had a conversation with Jody years ago that was just like a turning point in my career. Like, typically when I would speak with barbers and stylists, it was so easy to sit and talk about the technical aspects of what we do. And, oh, that's a very hard haircut to do. And they did it very well. And we're judging like how clean the graduation is and how sharp the lines are. And that's how barbers would talk. And that's how I would talk. And that's what we focused on. And so when I met Jody Taylor, we were sitting in the car in traffic driving somewhere. He had come to California for a visit. And having a conversation with him, he said he had a statement about everything he talked about with hair. He didn't talk about whether it was hard to do or whether it was clean work. He talked about whether it looked good. That's all it was. Just taste. Just, it looks really nice. And I'm like, that's huge. That's like such a huge difference from what I feel the majority of the industry looks at. You know, if I put up a haircut, every barber that looks at it is going to judge how clean the fade is and how clean the lines are. And if it's not up to par, but it's getting likes, they feel like something's wrong. But there's this whole other tangent of, well, does it look good? And it could be a buzzed head, but if it looks good, it's going to resonate with people on an emotional level. And so that's been a thing that I've challenged myself to keep in my consciousness as I work, is it's not about the technical work. It's about the vibe that you create with the technical work. It's about the emotion that you can actually make people feel emotions with a haircut. I mean, I've posted haircuts where people are like, oh my God, I love this. And the very next comment is, this is horrible, I hate this. And I'm like, I won in both cases. You felt something. And to me, like, I have a hard time calling myself an artist, but I think as soon as your work causes somebody to feel something, then it's art. But if it's just a good haircut, that's not art. It's a good haircut. You know what I mean? If I want to call myself a painter and all I do is reproduce logo, like the Coca-Cola logo, and it looks exactly like the can, it's just a reproduction of something that was already done nicely before. And to me, like, so many people doing good haircuts are freaking boring, you know? If you do good haircuts, don't call yourself an artist, you know what I mean? You have to be like bold enough to do a style that doesn't look like it was styled, or do a style that, do a cut that has something about it that maybe isn't deliberately intended to offend people, but absolutely challenge what their idea of a good haircut is. I don't know. I feel like every couple of years... Go on.
Yeah, I feel like some people worry a little bit though, because obviously we're in this social media state where people are worried about posting certain things that, like you say, don't look perfect, won't get likes, might get critiqued. And that's what I'll do like about your page, is that you don't give a shit. And it's like you post what you want to post, you know. I think that's a lot of people would worry about, that aspect of actually just putting things out there for people to judge. And I think that's what you just said about evoking emotion, like, and about art. And I look at that way about like certain types of photography, black and white photography, cinema, all these different things. If it creates some sort of emotion, whether it's positive or negative, I think that is the beauty of art, whether it is moving image, still image, or even a haircut, like you say.
Yeah, well, if you study any kind of art, it's one of the first things they tell you is it's not about the brushstroke. It's about how you make the viewer feel about the brushstroke. But for whatever reason in hair, we miss that. Like, I'm going to offend some barbers and stylists when I say this, but we miss the reason for our art, which is to evoke a feeling, whether it's in the client or in somebody who's looking at the haircut. We don't talk about that. We talk about how clean the fade is, or how, consistent the graduation is. And we get so stuck on this technical mindset, we forget why we're doing it. And the other thing, like on that note, is, in hair, it's something that is very much, we all can see the scores more or less. Like, you look at social media and somebody has a huge following and they have a blue check mark. And so that, more or less would be like a high score. It's like, oh, this person's doing really well with their career, to some. Or you can look at how busy somebody is, and it's very clear to see the score. You can see who's making money cutting hair. You can see who's busy, who's setting trends and all this. We know the score. But here's what we don't know in hair: the rules. Have you ever noticed that? Everybody's very aware of who's dominating and stuff. You mentioned Sophie earlier. You look at Sophie and it's like, she's killing it. We know she's killing it. But then if you ask 10 barbers or 10 hairdressers why, they'll all give you 10 different answers. You know what I mean? And so I think too many people look at the hair industry through the lens of like sports. You know, if you play basketball, there's rules and you become the best at basketball by following those rules. But in hair, that doesn't exist. And everybody kind of makes up their own rules because we don't know the rules. And then we hold these people who are excelling against our own rules. And if it doesn't add up, somebody cheated. So they're not that good. They shouldn't have such a big following. They're not that good. They shouldn't be so busy. But their rules are not your rules. I don't know if I'm making myself clear here, but we know the score, but we don't know the rules.
Yeah.
And we get angry about it.
I think the rules have kind of gone against what it was. And I mean, it's always evolving every year. You know, like when I first posted my page, it kind of blew up because I was doing something like no one was doing. Certain other people were just excellent at like Scorum. They were posting edgy, traditional haircuts, and they blew up. They went viral. They went like accelerated barbering into like the 2014 or whatever, 13, 12 or whatever. I can't even remember when it was. But there's people like that, and then they've grew the following like that. But I think now it's much more difficult to stand out because there's people who've pushed certain trends in certain directions, and you can't do it exactly the same as everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say too, for the past 2-3 years, I've been hearing a lot of people say, oh, it's impossible to grow on social media right now. And I was part of that camp. I believed that. I thought like anybody who's going to be big is already big. But since then, a friend of mine, Chloe Brown, she doesn't do hair professionally, but she styles her own hair and puts videos of it on Instagram. And she, over the course of a year, gained like 300,000 followers during a time when they said you can't do that. And so, you know, I do believe that it can be a lot harder now to stumble upon the success. But if you work at it and you study it and you make it your job to make content creation your job, as I said earlier, like this is now an essential tool for barbering. And if you understand that and make it your job to figure out content and do the best content you can, I think people can still absolutely grow. I recently found a cooking account on Instagram, Nish Cooks, Nish Cooks. And when I first found him, he had like 2,500 followers maybe. But looking at his 2 or 3 videos he had posted, I was like, this guy has the formula. This is going to work. Like it was just so clean and concise and fun and easy. And he shows these recipes that you might think are really complex, but he just puts them out there in such a simple way and in such a clean package. When I saw him, I was like, he's going to be big. And I think today he has like 500,000 followers. Wow. Only a couple months later. And so it still absolutely can be done. But, you know, I'll be one of the first to admit part of the reason I have a following is that I was just on Instagram early. And I think if I just got Instagram today, I wouldn't develop a big following. I might be able to get like 10,000 or something over a period of time. But I think one of the key things, and you started to mention this earlier, and then I stopped thinking about it again, but now that I'm back here, you mentioned earlier people being afraid to share things that are going to get critiqued. But if you look at anybody who's in a position that might be considered successful, right? Whether you're a shop owner or you're a world famous educator or whatever, every single one of them took some risk, whether it's being critiqued or losing all your money opening a shop, you know? And so I had a conversation with Maddie Conrad where we talked about this, but if you want to be an educator and all you do is really good haircuts and all you know how to say is what everybody learned in school anyways, only you're saying it a little bit different, you're not going to get up on stage. You have to say things that ruffle feathers because people don't put vanilla. People don't go, oh my gosh, this is the best vanilla. They want what stands out and what goes against the norm. You have to be willing to offend people and scare people, and you have to be willing to have haters in order to get in any of those positions. You cannot get there by doing what everyone is supposed to do. If you do what everyone's supposed to do, you disappear, you blend in. I don't know. That's my thoughts on the subject. Like you have to be open, even if, and I'll be honest, like there are comments like, when I get like haters online, if they're talking about my personal appearance, like that bums me out. But if they're like, oh, I don't like this haircut, it doesn't even bother me anymore because you could be like the best country singer in the world and there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like country, you know? And so the idea of people being afraid to post because they don't want to be critiqued, it's like you're not going to do anything if you're playing it that safe. You're not going to grow. You're not going to have anything epic happen in your career. You're going to kind of be stagnant.
I think we're in this position where everything's judged, everything's out on social media now, and everyone's worried about anything. Like you say, even people making fun of your appearance. And my YouTube channels, I mean, I don't get really the things that are too offensive, but if I could read through the comments, it's just hilarious. Like, I don't see most of them on some of the videos because they get so many, but it's just some of the comments are outrageous. There's haters waiting everywhere, and you just have to kind of grow thicker skin and just get on with it. The fact is, people are always going to criticize, whether that's on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, wherever. Even if they're just thinking it, they're going to critique and be haters. And we're probably in the place in society where there's more haters than ever. You know, people want to put people down, and that's just the fact. So if you want to grow, you have to take a few risks, like you say.
Yeah, and I think a huge part of it too is the reason we see so many haters online is the platform. It's not even necessarily the content, it's the platform. Like, I realize that some of the people who would say horrible, mean things on my YouTube or my Instagram would never say it to my face. They might think it, but they wouldn't say it. And so where I used to take as much offense to somebody leaving a comment as I would if they had said it to my face, I realized that it is 700,000 times easier to leave a comment than it is to say something to somebody's face, which means that it means 700,000 times less than a comment to the face. It means nothing. When somebody leaves like a mean opinion online, it means nothing. Like, it's just so easy to do, especially if somebody has a private account. It's like there's no weight to it. There's no relevance to it.
Yeah. So when you say you've obviously done education and stuff and you've traveled doing this, was that something that you were taught to do? Is that just your own kind of style of education? What's your approach?
Oh, man. I would say that, so when I went to school to get my license, like in the States, you'd have to have a license, and all they really teach you in most schools is just the bare minimum to get that license. And they don't teach you, if you go to an expensive school like a Paul Mitchell school or a Tony and Guy school, you will learn a lot of technical stuff. But if you go to a basic school like I went to, you just learn how to get your license. And so I went to a basic school, and then I never worked in a very high-end salon. I never assisted anybody. I just kind of like started cutting hair, and I sort of figured a lot of things out for myself along the way. And when I first started finding myself in rooms with people who are amazing, like I did a show with Robert Chromians one time, and I was afraid to even be backstage with him. I didn't want him to see how I held my scissors. Like, I do everything wrong because I'm just this nobody hairdresser from the middle of nowhere. Ultimately, though, I started realizing as I dabbled in education that my very informal training is kind of an asset to me, because to where somebody who came up in, let's say, Tony and Guy would have a way of talking. They talk like Tony and Guy. When they teach a haircut, they teach it the Tony and Guy way, and they use Tony and Guy language. And so anybody who's ever taken a Tony and Guy class is essentially hearing the same thing that they heard in the last Tony and Guy class, you know? And because I didn't have such a prestigious upbringing as a hairdresser, when I word something, it's very much in layman's terms. I feel like it's made it a lot easier for me to be relatable. Like, I don't think, if I'm teaching a haircut, I don't use the word elevate one time, because it's just not standard language, you know? I never initially wanted to go become an educator. It wasn't like on my list of things that I would dream to do, but as my Instagram following grew, requests started coming in. People were like, hey, will you come to my salon and teach? And I was like, I don't know how to teach. So what I started doing is going to local barber schools and cosmetology schools and doing free classes. And the way that I saw it is, okay, it's a free class, so if I do poorly, nobody's going to be mad. But also, I was talking to students, so they didn't know anything anyways. I could have said anything, and they would have thought it was okay. And after I had done a whole bunch of free classes in that way, I decided to do a small class for a salon, and they liked it enough. And so I just kind of got into teaching. And then I got back out of it because it was just so time consuming. Like, if I wanted to go work for an afternoon in Ireland, it required, 4 or 5 days of travel. And a lot of times most of the time I would do classes where what I made in the class, I spent to be there, which was fine and all because I got to see the world. I got to travel. I got to do cool things and meet amazing people. Like one of the crazy things about my life that I never expected is like if you took me in a helicopter and dropped me in Dublin, I could find people. I could find my way home to somewhere safe. Like I know people in Dublin. I know people in Belfast. I know like 2 people in London. And I never thought that I would have friends abroad like that. That's crazy. The internet's nuts,
I remember
man.
you going over there. What show was that for?
So I've been to Dublin a couple times for an event that they were calling Barber Cut. And
Okay, yeah.
that they're no longer doing that, which is sad because I would have gone back every year as long as they were doing it. It was so much fun.
You love Guinness?
What's that?
Do you like Guinness?
Oh, of course. But now, so it's funny because over here at least, anybody who's been to Ireland will say like, oh, the Guinness is better in Ireland. And then the rest of us go, okay, you pretentious dork. Like, but it's true. The Guinness is better in Ireland. I'm one of them now.
You just got to accept the fact that it is. Apparently, the only other place that pours a really good thing of Guinness is, I think it's somewhere in Africa. I can't remember where it is. But there's a brewery in Africa that I can't remember where it was. I just remember that story. It's a bit of useless information for you. A lot of your education that you do offer and like the videos that you talk about, a lot of it is down kind of about customer service and consultation. Why do you think that's super important?
Oh my gosh. So I'll make it a whole long story. When I started cutting hair, my price for a short haircut was $25. And after I became super busy and I didn't know what to do, I couldn't put any more time in the day. I didn't know how to make more money. I went and talked to a friend of mine who at the time was charging like $100 for a short haircut. And I went to him with a notebook and we got dinner and I just sat down and I was going to take notes on everything he was talking about. But what he asked me is, he goes, okay, let's say you were charging $50 for a haircut. What would you do different? And I was like, I don't know, a better haircut? And he goes, okay, no, like you do good enough haircuts. Let's say your clients tomorrow were giving you $50. How would you treat them? And I started thinking about it. And at that time I was dressing very casually to work and, you know, more or less half-assing certain aspects, just being very comfortable at work. And as I thought about the idea of a $50 haircut, I was like, dang, I would like polish my shoes. I'd wear a button-up shirt. I would show up early. I would look people in the eye and shake their hand. Like I would make sure everybody got like a really meaningful greeting, you know? And I just started listing all these things. And I would even stand up straighter for a $50 haircut. Like I wouldn't slouch. And as I'm listing these things, he stops me and he goes, why aren't you doing those things now? And I said, because I only charge $25. And then he said, if you start doing these things that you would do for a $50 haircut, you're going to service your clients to a level that is so valuable to them that you'll be booked so far out that you will have to charge $50 to keep appointments available. He also explained to me in that conversation that it's more rude to make your client wait 2-3 weeks for a haircut than it is to charge them a little more. And I think a lot of barbers are afraid of raising their prices, but if you're booked 3-5 weeks out, that's rude. I don't want to do that to my clients. And so everything that I had, and I even went and I got a $100 haircut around that time because I just wanted to see what you get for $100. And it was so much about, like, the consultation was drastically different than just going to a barbershop. The way that he talked in general, like, and the decor in the place and all these things were so much different. And the haircut was exactly the same. And so that's why I focus on that stuff so much, because I honestly believe you can get a perfect haircut for $20. Like, honestly, in almost any city. And you know this better than anybody, having traveled the world looking at all these different haircuts. Like, for $20 or less, you can actually get a technically perfect haircut. So what makes another haircut worth $100? You know, can a haircut be even better than perfect? And then on top of this, can a client even recognize a perfect haircut next to a really, really good haircut? And so going back to us not knowing the rules, we think, oh, if I could do a cleaner haircut than the next guy, then I can charge more than the next guy. But no, what it comes down to is if I can make enough people feel good enough about the haircuts I'm doing for them that I don't have any time left to cut any more hair, then supply and demand, I run out of time, I have to charge more. It's like basic economics. But the way that you get that is by the way that your clients feel. And the things you can do to make your clients feel better, like anytime I see somebody point at like a famous barber and go, oh, well, this is just hype or whatever, and they want to write it off, or they go, oh, well, he's not even that good, but he just takes good photos or whatever. All of these things really factor into the mindset of a client. Like if you have 100,000 Instagram followers, your client is proud of that, and it makes your haircut worth a little bit more to them. And I hate to say that because there are people who are going to completely disagree with me, but it's absolutely true. And even some barbers who are known to have an ego, I don't even have any problem with that, because some clients want to go to a barber who beats his chest and, sorry, microphone. Some clients want to go to a barber who's going to beat his chest and say, I am the best. And there are clients who value that. And so it's all these other weird little stupid things, the way you talk, the way you carry yourself, the way you fearlessly share your opinions that some people might not like, some people will love it. And if all you're doing is good haircuts in a very safe vanilla package, how do you be worth more than a perfect haircut? And as we discussed, a perfect haircut is $20, right?
In India, you can get one for 50 cents. I think that what you're saying is completely true. In my shops, I've always instilled like customer service is key. Even some people say to me, say we charge in the London store £35, which is quite a lot if you maybe live in Liverpool where I live, but we're quite cheap compared to the shops close by, or like our competitors in terms of how long we take to cut hair and stuff like that. But it's all the little things that make a difference. It's like you're greeted when you walk into the shop. When we walk over and shake your hand, we sit down and look you in the eye as we do the consultation. We wash your hair, we talk about it. Do you have any problems with your scalp? Everything from the moment you walk in to the time you leave, which also is usually with a handshake as well. You looked after, and people remember the experience, and that's what most people leave a review. The ones who leave a review generally say, great team, nice people, good atmosphere, and I think that's what makes a haircut worth charging more.
Absolutely. Or I think it's funny because there are so many people in the hair industry who are offended by these truths that you and I are talking here, and they think it shouldn't be that way, and they think it should just be about the quality of the actual technical cut. But you ask these same people, like, hey, if I have a Kia, do you guys have Kia cars in England?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I have a Kia and it's got like a sunroof and fold-in mirrors and heated and cooled leather seats and all this stuff, and I've got a BMW that has the same features, which one's better? If they have the same features, would you rather drive the Kia or the BMW? And everyone's like, oh, duh, BMW is better. Like, they know that there's this kind of baked-in value to the brand and to, like, and so it's funny because I actually drive a Kia, and it's one of their, like, luxury models with all the bells and whistles. And when I was looking at reviews on the car, the number one negative review was not about the car. It was about the way Kia treats you when you go to have it serviced. And they say, I miss my BMW because when I went to the BMW for service, they gave me a loaner car and the coffee, and they gave me a shoulder rub while I was waiting. And at Kia, they don't do this for me. And so we're very much aware of this. If I'm like, hey, do you want these Yeezys or do you want these Skechers that literally will keep your feet just as protected from the elements? Well, I want the Yeezys, of course. Okay, so there's some value to that, even though the actual technical what the shoes will bring you is identical. And then for whatever reason, they can't make that same differentiation when it comes to haircuts. They'll say, well, my haircut's just as good as this person who charges more than me. Something's wrong. They cheated. I'm like, you're wearing Yeezys and driving a BMW. You know why this haircut is worth more than this haircut. You just refuse to put in the work. And so are you familiar with this barber? I don't remember what his Instagram name currently is because he changed it recently, but for a long time it's Marv. Have you heard of him? He's the one that goes, barbers.
I've heard of him, yeah.
So I had a conversation with him, and regarding what I was just kind of alluding to, realizing the difference between this haircut from this haircut and not wanting to admit it, he pointed out very bluntly, and I love that he said this, but he said it's a coping mechanism. Rather than saying, hey, if I did learn to use a camera, my career could be better. Instead of taking on the challenge of learning to use a camera and putting the money into a camera, they go, well, that's just unnecessary. And it's a coping mechanism. It's them making an excuse to not have to do their best work. It's kind of like, I didn't learn to do fades until way later. And I struggled so much to learn how to do a good fade. And at that point, I could have said, well, fades are cheap anyways. That's a cheap barber cut. But I didn't say that. I didn't cope. I didn't have some coping mechanism to explain away why I didn't need to learn to do fades. I learned to do it. And so I think anytime I see a barber who's like, oh, well, that's unnecessary about anything, or, oh, well, that haircut shouldn't be worth more because what, I'm like, okay, you're deliberately stunting your own growth and making an excuse to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Well, people always say to me, but why is it so much? I say, well, a lot goes into it. You're not just getting a haircut, you're getting an experience. You're buying into the shop, you're buying into the experience, you're buying into people knowing your name when you walk in. You know what I mean? It's these little things. Like I've gone into shops, little shops, and not introduced myself or anything, just gone for a haircut over the years, and it makes sometimes I mean I just respect my own shop. I know it's my shop, but I kind of respect what we've grown it to be compared to some of the other experiences I've had. Although I've been to some shops where I paid £7 and it's a great experience. It's hello sir, how are you doing? You get a little massage at the end, a little hot towel and stuff. So yeah, it's just, I guess it's based on how proud the person is doing the service as well.
Yeah, and I think it should be noted that there's different kinds of clients, some who want the full experience and some who just want a haircut. And, if somebody who just wants a haircut comes to me, it's a ripoff. And they'll say, like, this was way too expensive, I just got a haircut. But at the same time, if a client wants the experience and they walk into a shop that just does haircuts, they're going to say, this was horrible, they treated me like crap. You know what I mean? And so there is no right answer, because I've met barbers who charge $8 and do 60 to 80 heads in a day and make as much money as I make charging $100 by the end of the day. And so there is no right answer. It's whatever pace you like and whatever your ultimate goal is. As I said earlier, I like to do creative work. And so I like to work on clients who are a little more fearless when it comes to choosing styles and who don't just want the standard hairstyle over and over. But I know some barbers where when they're faced with the task of doing a creative cut, it's draining for them. And they go, I just want to do a good haircut. I don't want to do this weird mullet thing. And so it's a matter of doing the work that you like to do and putting yourself into the right situation and gearing everything to attract the right client that thrills you to work with.
It is funny that, like, you say that. I was going to ask about that, like, about your clients. Generally, as you grow and you grow with a certain style and your haircuts are represented in a certain way on Instagram, do people kind of see that and appreciate the fact that when they go to you, they're not going to get a normal haircut? Not normal.
I would say about a third of my clientele gets more or less obscure haircuts, and not obscure in the sense of like super edgy, but just not trendy. And that's something I actually pride myself in, is like, yes, obviously I know what the trendy haircuts are. I follow everybody on Instagram, but I also don't run after the trends, and I never have. If I happen to do something that happens to be trendy, like, I want to admire it for the bigger picture, the taste that it has overall, but not because it's trendy. And I end up getting a lot of clients who kind of have the same mindset, to where they just want to do something that's cool to them, whether or not it's cool to anybody else. And I think I do tend to attract people who know that I'm not going to just slap the latest trend on them, because most barbers you go to are going to do a very good version of the latest trend haircut. You know what I mean? And I'm not afraid to do a bad haircut, and I'm not afraid to do a different haircut. And so people who crave that, who want the individuality of having weird hair or like a signature look, they seek me out. And to them, the price is well worth it. Because, like, example, this guy, Anthony, he lives in New York, but he comes to California for work often. He reached out on Instagram. He said, I'm going to be in California. I want you to cut my hair, but I don't want it to look clean. Everywhere I go, they give me a clean lineup, and they give me a nice clean taper. And he goes, I want it to look edgy. I want it to look like I cut it myself. And so, whole backstory, this guy's a model, or he was a model at the time, and they kept casting him for like Old Navy commercials and these boring nerdy things that he didn't like. And he's like, I want like an edgy look. I want to look messed up. And he actually flew to California for work, but went out of his way to come see me to get a haircut that is like my most hated haircut on Instagram. It's the one with the weird big step in the back. I'll send it over to you if you want to splice it in here. But that guy sought me out because he wanted a bad haircut, quote unquote, and I was willing to do it. And so many people who would hate on that haircut don't understand that there are clients who will travel. Like I have clients somewhat regularly who come get haircuts and have gotten on a plane to get that haircut. Like I have regular clients who fly to get haircuts, and it's not the ones who just want a really good regular haircut. It's the ones who want the haircut that the people near them just don't understand how to do. You know what I mean? And not that it's so technical, but and I don't want to say like, oh, I'm fearless. I'm so unique and creative, but it does require some great level of vulnerability to leave something messy or unfinished. But if you look at popular culture, you look at Brad Pitt, he never has a lineup. You look at Ryan Gosling, he never has a lineup. And yet so many barbers and hairdressers are afraid to skip a lineup. If a client comes to me and says, I want to look like David Beckham, and they show me a picture of David Beckham without a lineup, I'll point that out. I'll say, look, he doesn't have a lineup. Do you want to go like that? And they go, yeah, I've never not had a lineup before. And it's crazy to me how, we think we're replicating these like popular looks, but we're really not. We're really doing the barbershop version of it.
Yeah. For the most part, a lot of these haircuts are done by people who do session work or the makeup artists, so they're not doing it perfect. Obviously, some haircuts are ripped apart when you look at some of the haircuts on like the army movies where they've just been butchered. But it's like, well, what do you think it was like in the 1940s or 1920s?
Well, and at the same time, you got to look at the bigger picture. Like we as professionals will look at like Brad Pitt in Fury and we go, oh my gosh, he has a horrible fade. And we sit there and we rip it up and we mock it. And all the while we're doing this, you know what our clients are doing? They're coming in and asking for it. And so ultimately, like, what's the goal there? To do a perfect haircut or to do a haircut that has cultural impact and makes enough people feel something that they want that haircut too? And did it take technical perfection to do that? No, it did not. Kurt Cobain used 2 or 3 chords to change the world. And although, Vidal Sassoon was obviously very, very talented and technical, and he changed the hair world that way, it's not required in any means that you need to be technically proficient as an artist to affect somebody emotionally. And these bad haircuts on Brad Pitt and the like, you're saying the makeup artists typically tend to do them, and I have heard that. Who cares if it's not technically perfect? If people see it and like it and want you to recreate it, that's what it is. You can, and to me, I think it's even ego to say, you know what, Brad Pitt's haircut is not that good. I'll give you the good version of it.
Can you give me a little bit of insight onto the ADH brand? Because I know you talked a little bit about it before, but was it a big learning curve going to then produce a product?
Yeah, it was. Well, yes and no. I mean, as I mentioned, I didn't start it thinking like, I'm going to have a product line. I'm going to, this is going to pay my bills. Like I never thought any of that was going to happen. I literally just made something that I wanted to use, and I only intended to sell it to my clients initially. But for me, a lot of it was just taking tiny baby steps that were immediately apparent to me. Like when the product that I liked was discontinued, it was like fate that I happened to meet somebody who had connections at a manufacturer and like a lab and stuff. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe I can have something made. And it just didn't seem that hard to make that phone call. And then, it was like a $500 or $600 investment to get the first batch. And they were like, do you want us to put labels on them? And I was like, no, I don't have money for labels. I'll just get blank jars. So I got 60 blank jars and I sold them to my clients. And when I made a little bit of money on that, I hired a graphic designer to give me labels. And so the next time I ordered, I had labels. And when I sold out of those, I ordered a little more product. And it was literally just like that, like just one baby step at a time. And I didn't make any money on the product for the first like 4 or 5 years. Anything I made with sales went right back into ordering more product. And there were many times where I just wanted to quit doing it because I was like, why am I doing this? It's not even paying me. Like I couldn't afford, if I paid myself, it would just stop being a company. I couldn't afford the next order. And it wasn't until way later after I hired a manager, David, to kind of help me out with it, that we were able to be like profitable. But a lot of people have asked me for advice on starting a product line. And what I tell them is, first of all, and they all think I'm joking when I say this, but it is not easy money by any means. It's not like money in your sleep that like you just put the product out there and it sells. The margins are okay, but the expenses are really high. I mean, unless you're doing massive volume, And so it is hard. But my advice is like, first, make a product that you absolutely believe in. Like before you do anything, you need to have it in your hand and you need to personally actually believe that there's nothing else out there that can do this for you. And if you don't have that feeling, don't move forward. Unless your legitimate goal is just to make money, but you'll probably fail if you don't have a product that you truly believe in. And then once you believe in it, get the other barbers in your shop to use it and get their feedback. And when you know that they like it, then find a barbershop down the street that might want to carry it and get their feedback. You know, I've seen a lot of my friends and acquaintances over the last couple of years take their life savings and start a product line and do a big launch and a campaign, social media and all this. And then a year later, they don't have a company anymore. It's a lot of product lines start and then stop because they just dump everything into it and it doesn't catch on. So I don't know, my advice if anybody wants to do something like that is keep it grassroots and get approval along the way as you grow. And when I say approval, I mean, like I said, make sure you like it. And when you approve of it, see if the people in your shop like it. And when they approve of it, go to the next step. Don't just try to like shoot for just like worldwide distribution before anybody's even touched the product. Like that's scary. Unless you're in the business of doing that already. Like I want to say I heard that the people behind American Crew were also behind Ruzel, and that's how Ruzel kind of out of nowhere just became giant and was everywhere because there was people who were experienced at creating these giant product lines. I don't have that experience, so I just took it one baby step at a time.
Yeah, I think Lawrence, who helped the guys personally, he helped them. He basically used to work at American Crew in the like early years in the 90s. And he helped them kind of create a product that was marketable. And I guess he had that experience of launch and successful products. I'm not sure how involved it all is or how it goes back to American Crew, but I know they're quite friendly with David Raculia as well, who's also a phenomenal photographer. Started a product line in the 90s, like completely pioneered men's hair products. Like American Crew Fiber was like,
yeah, that was the thing. That was
one of the most incredible products. I mean, it still holds its own in today's world. You know, when I was growing up until I got to the age of 14, 15, I'd never had a product that I could actually do something with my hair. And it was American Crew Fiber and Foreman Cream, which changed my life. Before that, it was just gel and it did nothing. You know, so yeah, big props to the American Crew guys in the first place. They completely revolutionized, especially like you were talking. It's like nearly 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's weird to think that it happened so late. Like the whole men's hair product revolution. I feel like it. Why didn't it happen in the 60s?
Nearly 30 years ago. Sorry, not even 20. I was just counting. Then I was like, in 4 years, it would be like 30 years since.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I still haven't read it yet, but you actually wrote a book on Instagram, ADH book, and it's still there. People can read it.
Yeah. So
what is it about? And why did you write
it? Something I've been kind of known to do is post really, really long rants on Instagram. I'll just post like paragraphs and paragraphs.
You're like one of the only person whose posts I read who are that long.
Thank you. But I never, deliberately intended to do that. It's just if I have a thought, I'm going to sit and I'm going to put the whole thought out there. And at one point, somebody on one of those posts said, "Hey, you should write a book." And they were probably being sarcastic, just saying, "Hey, these posts are so long, they might as well be a book." And I don't know, I had a little free time and I was like, maybe I will write a book. So I just took out my computer and started writing stories about moments in my career when my perspective changed and led to growth. Some of the things we've talked about in this podcast already is like realizing that if I dress better to work, this outcome might happen. And so I just started writing stories about the moments when these things changed for me. And initially I was going to publish it more traditionally, or try to find a publisher or something, or even self-publish and just have them print it up and sit on inventory. But as I was writing the book and I was kind of teasing Instagram and saying, "Hey, I'm writing a book," I would screenshot pages to post like excerpts from the book. And then it hit me like, wait, hang on, I could just post the entire book to an Instagram account. And as far as I know, to this day, nobody else has done it. I think I was the first book on Instagram. And I think it's a cool way to use the platform. Like it works perfectly for that. You just go to ADH book and you go to list view and you can read through it. So I put it up there, and a lot of my friends were like, you're crazy, you're not going to make money on it this way. And I'm like, I'm not doing it for money. I'm doing it to tell my story and help people. The way I saw it is like, you know, as you mentioned, it's hard to kind of find a bio about me out there. I just wanted it to be something for people to get to know me a little more, and to also get to know themselves. And you know, if they find themselves faced with any of the things I struggled with through my career that are written about in that book, like hopefully it can help them to overcome it and continue to grow. And so it's just a tool, a resource out there for anybody who's just curious to know more about hair. The actual like working title of the book is Typical Cosmetology Stuff, but I titled it for Instagram ADH book just because it's easier to find that way.
And it's interesting that the way people keep a track on what they've read is they like every post.
Yeah, no, and that works too. You're scrolling down, looking at the red hearts, and once you see a white heart, you're like, okay, that's where I left off.
Yeah, no, that's a really good idea. I actually need to just spend some time and read through it.
It's a quick read. You'll get through it in like an hour.
Is it? So what does Andrew do when he gets a creative block?
Ooh, a couple things. One thing that tends to work really well is I'll take a haircut or a hairstyle that I typically don't like that's just not my style, and I'll try to do it, and I'll try to do it in a way that I do like it. And so if the things that I like are no longer inspiring me and I'm not getting creative, I'll pick something I don't like. Like personally, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the American barber haircuts that are overly lined up and almost synthetic looking, like just fake hairlines and fake spray on things. And so when I'm stuck, I'll do one of those haircuts. Like I'll reach out to a model who has that type of hair. And it just gets me thinking literally opposite of how I normally would think, because I'm doing something that I don't like, but I'm trying to do it in a way that I do like it. And it just helps me to literally like shake up my perspective on creativity.
That's interesting. I don't get that sometimes, all the super sharp, like cutting people's hairlines off. And I always think about the client, 4 or 5 days after they left, and they've got 2 more weeks before they go back, and it's just not for me.
Well, there's a lot of clients too who will literally be in the shop every 5 days to get their lineup done. And that's cool. Like if you want to do that, do that. Anytime a client does ask me to shave something off like that, I warn them like, hey, in 5 days, it's going to look really bad. And if they go, it's cool, I'll come back in 5 days. I'm like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah. Are you a fan of the hard part? Hard part? Like people are getting the...
I mean, when it came out, I thought it was really cool and refreshing. Very shortly afterward, though, like there were just these horrible bastardized versions of it that were so bad. I think to me, my biggest pet peeve regarding that trend is that they would put the part wherever they wanted instead of where the hair actually parted. And so that just drove me nuts. Like people think a part is a line that you shave in your head. No. A part is where your hair grows in 2 different directions, So yeah, I think it got played out pretty quickly, but for a minute it was good.
Some people are holding on to it. Every time I go to cut hair in the shop, there's people who are like, "Oh, can you shave the line and shave the line?" And it's always funny because every time they go to a new barber, someone's trying to follow the last barber's line, and it ends up being all like this, and it's crazy. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah, my clients who are still hanging on to that, I hate to say this, they're not the most adventurous. Like, they're just finding out about it. And to them, it's a purely like utility. It's just like, I have a hard time finding my part. Can you just shave it in there? And they're not doing it because they want it to appear shaved. They're doing it because it's easier for them to find it. And so like the little bit of hard part that's kind of hanging on in my clientele, that's kind of the purpose of it. I've even at times like on one client, I faked it. Like I had no blade in the razor, and I was like, there's your hard part. It's subtle, but it's there. And he's like, yeah, I love it. It doesn't even look like it was done.
Imagine like he's at his friend's house now going, yeah, and this guy, he pretended to do it. Do you have any tips for productivity? Do you have any things that you kind of do Generally, it doesn't have to be to do with haircuts.
Oh man, I think something that's been really helpful to me recently, I would say like overall in my career, I've been really afflicted with procrastinating and being such a perfectionist about certain things that I don't finish certain tasks. There are so many projects that I've started and not finished. And what I found very recently because of this pandemic is if I give myself a hard set recurring schedule, it's so much easier to get stuff done. I've always been the type, if creativity strikes, I'll jump up and do work right then and there, even if it's the middle of the night. And like I would come down to the studio here and set up cameras at midnight if that's when it struck me. But now I'm like, okay, it's 9 o'clock. I'm going to go down to the office. And even if I don't have an idea, I'll just come down to the office and drink an energy drink and sit here and just like go crazy on caffeine and then until I get an idea. And so giving myself these hard routines and schedules has been really helpful.
Yeah, I think routine is one thing that a lot of people struggle with. And routine, I guess, allows for consistency as well. Because if you have a schedule to stick to it, and you have, say, 2 hours to create a video, then you got to create a video in those 2 hours. The amount of times I've gone on my calendar and created the schedule for myself, and then by the following week it's just gone somewhere else. Yeah, it is difficult, but it also, you do get a lot done when you actually stick to it. I know photography is a big part of your life. When did you actually start shooting?
So the story goes, after I was on Instagram a little bit and my following grew a little bit, I had a magazine, American Salon, I believe it was, reached out and they wanted to do a feature on me because of my Instagram following. And in the email, they requested high resolution photos of my work. And I said, well, can I send you an iPhone photo? They said, no, we need like nice photos. And so I hired a photographer, a guy I knew. I paid him $150 to come out and take pictures of a haircut for me. And a couple weeks later, a different magazine, same thing. They wanted to feature like Instagram barbers. And so they wanted a professional headshot and they wanted professional photos of my haircuts. And so I hired the same photographer a second time. And for another $150, I got photos again. And so after that, I realized like, hang on, twice now I've needed high-res photos. I should just buy a camera. So I went to Best Buy or whatever, and for $350 or $400, I bought like a cheap Canon Rebel, and learned really quickly that just having a nicer camera and not knowing how to use it doesn't look any better than an iPhone. And I wasn't even interested in photography at first. It was just something that I felt like was very apparent that would help my career. And I was like, well, I guess I better get better at this if I'm going to need photos all the time. And so as I started learning it, I started to really enjoy it. And I definitely noticed that if I got 10% better at cutting hair, my career improved 5%. But if I got 10% better at photos, my career was improving 20%. And so I just put so much effort into photography for a while. In fact, I quit my salon. Well, let me back up to before I quit the salon. When I noticed that a great picture of even an average haircut on Instagram would do really well, where an amazing haircut that had a decent or crappy photo didn't do very well, when I realized that, I started setting up time every week after work. Every Thursday is when it was. I'd tell my wife, hey, on Thursday nights, don't wait up for me. Just get dinner and take care of yourself that night. And don't wait for me. Excuse me. And so on Thursday nights, I would stay late after work. I'd work all day, 9 to 5 or whatever. And then at the end, I would invite somebody in for a free haircut with the stipulation that for your free haircut, you're going to sit for a photo. And from about 5 years ago, almost everything I post on my Instagram came from one of these sessions that was literally like set up to create content. It wasn't a snapshot of a haircut I just happened to do. And I reached a point where the opportunities I was getting through Instagram because of the photos could potentially pay me a lot more than what I was making cutting hair full time. And so I quit working in the salon and I opened up a photo studio with a hair cutting chair in it. So it was like a hair photo studio, whatever. But it had backdrops and everything like I have here. And for 2 years, I just focused on photo. And I ended up putting out, well, I was focusing on photo, but I was also doing education, everything from hair cutting to photo. And it just helped my career it opened up so many doors for me. Getting features in magazines, getting connected with people and places and getting reposts and like every good thing that happened in my career happened because of my photos. And so that's why I kind of obsess over it now. But also it's fun.
Yeah.
And so when I see a barber who does very good work, but their photos suck, it like pains me. Like I want to just go to him and be like, here's a camera. Like I want you to be doing better. I don't know. It's just the
What camera do you shoot on at the moment? What's your favorite go-to? What's your go-to camera at the moment? What do you have?
So it's funny, the camera I'm recording on right here is an EOS R by Canon, and it's, I mean, currently it's like one of their higher end cameras. But the one that I use more often is this one, which is a Canon EOS RP, which is like the smaller, cheaper, lighter version of it. And so it's one of their first mirrorless cameras, and it is just so much fun to use. Like ergonomically, it's the most comfortable camera I've ever found. It is the cheapest full frame camera that's ever been released. So it's $1,000. I think it's a little bit more in the UK. But to me, I think this is like the perfect content creator barber camera. It's amazing for portraits because it's got the full frame sensor and all that. But the bells and whistles and the little features, like you can flip the screen around for YouTube. It's got a mic input and all this. Like, it's just such a fun, creative little tool. And I know like Sony has better specs than Canon typically, but for what we're doing, like content create, like my main job is cutting hair. My side job is creating content. I don't want to be sitting on a computer 6 hours editing. I want to be able to like shoot and go. And Canon just has like a super fast, easy workflow. The colors look great right out of the camera, where like Sony is known to have like not as nice colors. It's an opinion. It offends people, but it's, you know, it's known.
It's true. Since I stepped over into the Sony world a few months ago, solely because like my documentary videos and stuff, I wanted to have a bit more slow-mo. And it's just something kind of we're not offering in you know, having like, I need either one or two cameras that do different things while I'm on the road. One's better at video, one's better at stills, one can do slow-mo maybe, shooting in log, which allows me to shoot a flat image so I can edit the colors a little bit different later.
Okay, so I almost shot this in log and I didn't because I didn't want to burden you with grading it, and now I wish I would have shot it in log. Dang.
It's just, yeah, like 100% Canon has better color science in their cameras, like straight out of the camera. Some of the cameras don't come with log though. You know, sometimes you have to pay to get it installed. Sometimes it's just not even an option. You can get the presets a kind of log. You can get them off different places, different websites. So for what I needed at the time, like a mirrorless camera that was light, shot 4K, which without creating massive files, and had log and Cine 4 and stuff like that. That's why I stepped over into the Sony world. But 3 days ago, did you see the new Canon announcement?
Game changer.
Yeah.
I'm not even interested in it because like the specs are so far above my pay grade. Like I don't even shoot in 4K. To me, I think it's not worth it for what I do.
It's not really necessary for most things, to be honest. Like I'll shoot this in HD. I'll shoot a lower like res 4K like on some of the ASMR like shave videos, and then the documentary I've only ever done one in 4K, which is the most recent one because it's the only time I've had a Sony that's had the option to do that. But for general day-to-day things or social media, it's 100% not necessary.
Yeah. Well, so a lot of times when I'm trying to talk to, like, barbers will reach out and say, hey, what camera do you recommend? I always aim them toward a Canon because, like I said, the colors are just good. Like if you don't want to get into color grading and stuff, just get a Canon. And then the other thing is, like, if you Google it, you can find this, but one of the biggest complaints about Sony is that their menus aren't very intuitive. And I've never used a Sony long term, so I'm sorry?
They're crazy. Like my Sony has it's like 40 pages, and there's the autofocus options are on like 5 of those pages spread out across those 40 pages, and it's like, what are you doing?
Exactly.
Like,
okay, so I'm glad that it's so I've heard it over and over, but I didn't know how true it actually was. But so when a barber says I want a first camera, I'm not going to recommend the one that has the difficult menus and requires more color grading, you know. But then at the same time they go, yeah, but Sony has 4K and it shoots 20 frames a second, and I'm like, do you need any of that to put a haircut on Instagram? You don't. And so what I generally tell people is buy a lens first. And so when somebody asks me like, hey, which camera should I get? I send them a link to a lens, an 85mm f1.8 lens. And then they go, that's the lens, what camera? And I'm like, any camera. Just get that lens and get any camera.
Yeah.
Because for stills, for haircut portraits, we're shooting a still subject in a well-lit room, so we don't need great low-light performance. We don't need fancy autofocus.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, you can get away with an 8-year-old entry-level camera as long as you have good glass on it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's all about the lens. I think when people come to me and say what camera should I get, if it's a starting one, I'll always say get a Canon. I'll always say get a used one off eBay because you can play around with it, you can smash it up. We used to have in the Berlin store the 550D, which is basically it's the same as the Rebel, just repackaged. And then just recently we bought I think we bought a 7D, like literally the old school one, for the Berlin store because it's taking pictures of haircuts. And the London store we just got a 5D Mark II, which is an amazing camera. It's for cutting haircut pictures, put a 50mm lens on.
So you have like a shop camera to where all the barbers just go pick it up and take a photo of their haircut?
We haven't for a while. In the London store, Nick would allow people to use his camera, but too many times people drop them. So then the burden's on him. So I eventually just bought this camera. In fact, they got delivered like on the day lockdown happened, so no one's actually had the chance to use them yet. But generally, yeah, the Berlin store had a 550D for a while, but it got stolen, as well as all our cameras. So yeah, I think it is good to have a shop camera because then your staff can take photos and then you can put them on the social media.
If I ever owned a shop, I would require that every barber and stylist learned a little bit about photo, and I would have like I have my studio lights in here right now. Yeah. I would have a set of these like in the shop and everybody would know how to use them, and it would be required that everybody's social media looked amazing because here's the camera, I'll provide it for you, here's the lights, let me show you how to use it. Now you have no excuses, you have to have good photos.
Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't be a very good boss.
You have to do this. Would you ever open a shop, or is that kind of
Probably not. I read a book a long time ago called E-Myth. It stands for the entrepreneurial myth.
It's an amazing book.
Okay, so to the listeners, basically the book points out that for a business to be successful, it requires like 3 different personalities. You have to be a good technician, you have to be a good manager, and you have to be a good entrepreneur. And it's very different personalities for very different jobs. And I like doing technical work, but I hate managing people. I hate looking at paperwork. I hate all that stuff. And so like when I look at the idea of opening a salon, it's like, okay, well, what would I get if I open a salon that I don't have now? And somebody pointed out to me like, oh, you could do your creative work there. And I'm like, I'm sitting in a studio right now to do creative work. I already have that. Okay, well, what else can I get at the salon? And as we talked about much earlier, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make more money just because you own a salon, because your expenses go up at the same time. And so, okay, well, what else then can I get if I open a salon? Well, you get to train a team of people. You can really help people to grow and become their best barbers and stylists. And I'm like, yeah, that is a good idea, but I already do education, so I'm already kind of doing that. Like, and if that was my goal, I could even get on YouTube and teach, you know what I mean? And so I don't need to own a salon to teach people. And so I just can't find a scenario where opening a salon is worth the headache. Like, it wouldn't give me anything that I want that I don't have right now.
I think a lot of people, it's a lot of people's goals to open a shop, early on in the career, like you say, like you leave high school, the idea is open a shop eventually. That's where you make your money. But soon after opening shops, I realized pretty much what you said. And it's funny that I spoke with one of my good friends. His name's John Roth. He owns Crow's Nest Barbershop in Canada. He has 8 shops or something like that. And we were talking when I was over in Canada, and we were like, yeah, some of our barbers earn more than us.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. Well, and on
we
top
have
of it
all
too.
The stress.
So I currently work in a salon 1 day a week, and right before this whole lockdown happened, the dryer broke, and so he had to go put in a new dryer. That must have been, $800 or $1,000. And when you're the owner and something breaks, you get to replace it. The first salon that I worked in, I remember the air conditioning went out, and it was like thousands of dollars to put in a new air conditioning. And none of the stylists were on the hook for that. They just had their regular chair rent, but the owner had to eat that cost. And I was like, I don't want to be an owner. Even at one point, my salon owner years ago, she was on vacation. She's a holiday, if you will. So she was out for a few weeks to enjoy herself on a cruise. And I remember one of my coworkers calling her from the salon to say, hey, this light bulb burned out. Where do we keep the spares? And I was like, I would be freaking pissed. I would be so upset if I was on a vacation or a holiday and one of my employees called me to ask where the light bulbs were. Like, ugh.
It's happened to me. I mean, maybe not when I was on holiday, but definitely when I've been away doing stuff, and I'll get a question about something as small as a light bulb. It's like, well, just go. There's plenty of stores nearby. Just go grab one. But we're lucky with things like Amazon these days because I can just go on my phone and order something to get there the next day. But what you said before, it's interesting. Like, if anyone's listening and thinking about getting into business, The E-Myth is definitely a book that I always recommend to people, even if they're not getting into businesses, even if they're just a self-employed barber or whatever, anything. It talks and notes quite a lot about why businesses don't succeed rather than why they do. It's not giving you a pathway to say this is what you should do. It's like this is what you shouldn't do. And it's definitely one of the books that helped me along my journey. And I read that when I was probably 19, like years ago. But yeah, what was I gonna say? So if you could give advice to 20-year-old Andrew, what would it be?
That's a weird, tough question because, not to brag, but I'm very, very happy with where my career is. And so I feel like if I could go back in time and talk to me, I wouldn't want to mess anything up and not end up where I am right now. You know, I might think, you know, maybe I would pull like a Back to the Future and give myself the heads up about how the world's going to change. Say, hey, you know, in 2013, people are going to start doing this hard part thing, so you need to do it in 2012. Like, maybe I would do something like that. But, you know, I look back at the struggles, the things that I worked so hard at that in many ways ended up being pointless. Like, let me use an example. I mentioned that I learned how to do fades way later. And I think back to how hard I was trying to learn fades. And like, on one hand, I would think like, oh, I'll tell myself like, don't worry about fades so much because you're not going to do that many of them anyways. But I really appreciate that I learned how to do it. Even though I feel like the amount of work it took me to get good at fades and the amount of good that it did for my career is completely, like, it was a waste of time in all honesty. But I still think it happened for a reason, and I'm glad that it did happen. So yeah, I wouldn't really change anything.
So what do you actually have in store in future for the brand, and do you have any personal goals that you want to kind of achieve?
Oh man, I know that like for the product line at least, a common question is like, hey, do you want to expand the line and do more products? And I'm almost absolutely certain that I don't. Like, I really like that it's simple. It's 2 products. And so as far as the product line goes, like, I don't have giant plans for the future because even everything we have right now was unexpected. And so I'm just grateful that I have it. But something I would love to be able to offer is like some kind of education program for my resellers. I started to look into doing like an Ireland tour and going to like every barbershop that carries it in Ireland and doing speeches and lectures over a couple days or whatever. So I would love to do some kind of educational, like, I would love to do some kind of education for my resellers, like in a bigger, cooler way. I don't know how that could be implemented. I mean, but that's definitely been on the horizon. Like, I want my education to be bigger, deeper, and more available, I guess. I mean, I already have like online education, and so I don't know how you get much more available than that, but I don't know. Just I keep wanting to do more of the same. And as I mentioned earlier, like, I really enjoy doing the creative work and the photo shoots. Like, something that I really want to do, like kind of a personal goal. I want to win one of the awards, you know, maybe not something massive like NAHA, which would be like our version of the BHAs. But, you know, maybe like behind the chair or something. Like, I would like to win an award, but as a photographer. That's kind of a personal goal. Like, I don't really care to compete with my haircuts because I don't care to prove that I'm any better at anybody at cutting hair. But I do think I would feel really cool if I want to shoot somebody else's work and win an award as a photographer. Just because I have a hard time calling myself a photographer, even though I really do like photography. I still call myself a photography enthusiast, but I feel like if I got an award, then I could be a photographer. I don't know. So that's like personal goals.
I think some of the awards though, where you are, entering a haircut, it is quite a lot about the image. So if you shot it, that's 50% of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's personal goals. Again, not trying to open a shop. I'm really torn on, like right now I work 1 day a week behind the chair with clients, and sometimes I think I want to do that a couple more days a week just because I miss the pace of it and everything. But I also don't want to get like stuck. Like if I take on more days and I get more clients, then I owe my time to more people, and it's really hard then to travel and teach and do other projects. And so I go back and forth. Maybe I want to work more, maybe I don't want to work more, but taking clients more might be in my future. I think especially after this pandemic thing, when this is over, I'm going to work like 5 days a week for a month or two.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait for it to be over. Sick. Well, I think that's all. We got quite a lot out of that interview. It's an hour and a half or whatever. So did you want to give out your social media in case anyone's just listening?
If anybody's interested, you can find me all over the internet if you search Andrew Does Hair. So that's YouTube, Instagram. Actually, that's about it. And my website is andrewdoeshair.com. So nothing complicated, no underscores anywhere. Just Andrew Does Hair on any platform.
Sick. Well, thank you so much for your time. We'll go off the air now, and I'd love to have you back on at some point discussing some other subjects.
I'd love to be back. Thank you.
Sick, bro. Thank you.